Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 36 of IGEL Weekly. I've been doing a lot of IGEL stuff, been doing a lot of podcasts the last couple of days, kind of losing track of things. Had to go double check, make sure I was talking about the right podcast and the right episode. Chris Feeney has been with me for most of these things I've done recently, including a Citrix podcast and the Digital Disrupt last week. Chris, how's it going?
Going well, man. I got over a little sickness last week, so I don't sound like a frog, but that's good. So Christmas is here. I feel like we've been going, it's cool to do this because we've been going through like the different seasons, and as you can see it, well, you can't really see if you're listening, but Christmas decorations are up, and it is the season to be jolly. So
yeah, I saw that. All right, so I got a lot to talk to you about here in the beginning. Quick question. We will post the videos. Those are coming. My son is going to do an internship in the next couple of weeks, and I literally have like 150 podcasts that'll turn into video podcasts that he'll be posting on our YouTube channel. So it is coming. But your guitar in the background, is it normally green or is that a different color?
that is my green guitar. It is jade green specifically. So I have a red, a green, and a tan normal guitar. So this one, there is a Christmas story behind this one. So a few years ago, it was it's sort of like what we had the last week or so. Very warm December weather, and so some friends of ours were having a party in the backyard, and it was going late. We were going to bed, and couldn't go to sleep, and so what I do? I pick up the iPad and I turn on the Spectrum TV app, and I see this Keith Urban thing going on. I'm like, oh, Keith Urban guitar, this would be awesome. And it was him on the Home Shopping Network promoting his new album and his new line of guitars and stuff. And so I saw this green jade one. I was like, that is such a thing of beauty. And it's a package deal. How great is that? So I get my phone, I download the HGV app, whatever, and log in, swipe my card, and then I turned to my wife and said, thanks for buying me my Christmas present. It shows up a few days later, and I've loved it ever since. It's a great guitar. So
yeah, that's how my wife. So that's your Christmas guitar-ish in the background. Now, when we hit record button, we were talking about your audio sounds different today. And you and I have been back and forth the last few days trying to help a customer with audio, Teams offloading specifically, and audio devices in a cloud-centric, thin client-enabled world is extremely important. The customer we're talking to is having issues with echoes, and you're working with a company called EPOS, right? EPOS, to get the best of breed stuff they have. And you've been doing a really nice job on the events we've done lately, wearing a headset from those guys, a wireless Bluetooth headset, I believe. And today you're using a speaker setup, and you sound different. Not as good as normal, but still pretty good. You want to talk about the EPOS stuff real quick and how having the right hardware in a software-defined world still matters?
Yeah. So the story here is at HIMSS early in August, we had an IGEL Ready booth, and we had different vendors there sponsoring. And I, before the end of the show, I kind of walked around and tried to get a sense of, where we integrated with these folks. And EPOS was there, and we had just added their client software, which allows you to basically turn it on, very similar to what we do with some other things, where it just points to some other thing. And in their case, their management console, so you can see what device is plugged in, that type of stuff. So I said, well, I'd love to try these things out and just kind of give it a whirl and get a sense of what it's like. So they sent me some devices. The one I'm using today is sort of like a traveling one. It's a speakerphone. Can do music. It is Teams optimized, so it can do Bluetooth. It can do NFC. So it's got a variety of things. It's got noise canceling built in, but it is a different experience. It's not over the ear, and obviously the audio is just slightly different versus having that headset right up next to my mouth or close to it. But you're coming in loud and clear. I'm not hearing any echoing. And I think that the story is certainly there's a lot you can do in software. Citrix has some settings, IGEL does too. And sometimes the endpoint hardware might particularly matter, but you might have a need for some of that noise canceling technology in the actual device itself. There's a lot of different headsets out there. I know Seb has some really cool headphones on right now. It looks like it's over the ear, kind of probably built-in noise canceling things. And so I'm trying this one out and seeing how it goes. And right now it seems, I mean, you can hear me fine. I can hear you fine. But it is a different experience, but it'd be great for like a little travel thing. If I could set this up in a conference room, if we didn't have something and it works over Teams, works over Zoom, like we're doing here. And, and when I'm not on a call, I'm playing some Christmas music. So
Chris, what model is it? Just so our listeners know the actual model number.
So this one is the SP speakerphone, I guess, 50. Let me get the actual box. It is wrong box. Sorry. The SP30T BT speakerphone, and it has MS Teams. So I guess it's been certified for MS Teams optimized or whatever.
Yeah.
EPOS, you may have known them as Sennheiser, same company. They just rebranded under EPOS, EPOS. So they have a number of devices that are available on their website, obviously wired to wireless and that type of thing. I like the wireless because I like to roam around and that type of thing. And if you're kind of tethered, you don't really get that. But the tethered option might be suitable for somebody in a certain setting, that type of thing. But anyways, a lot of cool stuff in the IGEL Ready program. So
yeah. Okay, great. I may get one. I've got a conference coming up. The speaker and we got to move on, but speaker and mic are both built into this device, right?
Yeah, speaker, mic, the whole bit. So
awesome. Okay. We have Seb with us. Seb, how's it going?
Quite good. It was a really interesting discussion. I mean, just listening was enough. Now, we have the same issues on all over the earth regarding the echo canceling and noise canceling and firmware deployment. That what Chris just mentioned is extremely important to me because we barely lost a project in Switzerland a couple of years ago because the configuration management of a specific headset brand couldn't be achieved on IGEL, and we had to integrate something by our own for deploying that configuration, which found a way then in an upcoming firmware version. But that was something that really changed the mind of our customer in that moment, because he saw that it's not only a headset that you're connected to a device and it's running from the beginning on, but you have so much different configuration also on the endpoint, your firmware version that you have to use on your headset. That's definitely something which is getting more complicated nowadays.
I equate it to, a modern day software defined car like a Tesla, but you put crappy tires on it, which a lot of people try to do, not with their Tesla, but in their virtual desktop, their thin client solution. They go buy the cheapest microphone they can and then complain it doesn't work. Life doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
especially if you look at the webcams. Sorry.
No, I think in my EUC journey, one of the things that I remember, seeing these things just sort of appear, like the emergence of hyperconvergence, right? And pulling all this together to really optimize that experience at the end of the day, where you have it sort of all encompassed in this one thing, the SSD, the fast disks and then the RAM and all this stuff, right? And so it's a combination of solutions and having various options and obviously software integrated, so that you can manage these devices at the end of the day as well. So I don't want to go too far off topic, Amy. This is a great one. We can keep talking, but I know Seb's got a really cool blog that we can talk about. So
yeah, as you wish.
Why not?
So let's put this in the future hopper for a corporate podcast where we get somebody from EPOS on, talk about offloading, talk about the audio devices that have to come to the mix and the webcams.
I will do that. I'll reach out to my contacts and we'll get it on the schedule.
All right. Well, as Chris was alluding to just now, we do have a vlog, I guess I'll say, that's also a blog that Seb put out, I think today, right? Seb, hot off the wire, not the presses, but the wire.
I just begged Doug to publish it today, that we have a topic that we can cover easily during our podcast. So he fulfilled my dreams and he published the video. So I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, and at some point, again, we'll have these videos online. You can use this to get to Seb's video, or just Google the name of the article, blog, how to use, install, configure, and use the IGEL OSC appliance that Seb put a great video together, and we're going to talk through now. Seb, OSC stands for what?
Operating systems creator. So basically that the procedure that you are using if you want to deploy the IGEL operating system on any kind of endpoint, which is then x86 based. So let's assume that you want to use the IGEL operating system and you're not wanting to use a UD Pocket or an IGEL endpoint. Let's assume you would take an LG device or Lenovo device. You will have to deploy our operating system on that endpoint. We have a couple of ways to do that. One is to create a USB stick. And we have another way, which is the network way. And today we are covering the network way. We will have an upcoming vlog on the OSC stick creation, so the USB pen drive. But in our case today, we'll cover the network part.
So OSC operating system converter, is that what the C is for?
Creator in that case, creator.
Sorry, yes. And this, so basically this is Pixie booting into an OS that allows you to then lay down the IGEL OS that allows you to then deploy en masse across the network instead of running around with a USB stick and converting devices.
Exactly. Okay. Just one thing that came to my mind, because it's something that I guess I mentioned in the video itself, but I just want to re-mention it here. We are always thinking about the OSC as an initial installation of the IGEL operating system. But you may also have situations where you have to recover a device that went broken because of dead SSD or HDD, or maybe sometimes because, you did some misconfiguration or we had an issue during the update process and you want to recover the device. The device can be backed up by using the OSC procedure, so reinstalling the IGEL operating system on it. And that's also a thing that I want to point out. If a device cannot boot up anymore, you can still, in most cases, recover it by using the OSC by reinstalling the IGEL operating system.
So this is like with Windows where you have to reinstall every 6 months because it gets all wonky with stuff, right?
Hopefully it's not the same. Hold on.
We're not going to suggest that you need to reinstall IGEL every 6 months here.
No, that was my joke, right? So in world of Windows, every 3 years, more than likely, you're going to have to reinstall just because whatever got on there. And you don't trust it, or maybe you do trust it, but it's not performing well, or maybe both. In the case of IGEL, this is not a frequent thing to have to re-image. You're probably going to use this to image the first time and then maybe have to image later. But for the most part, it's stable and manageable throughout the life cycle.
And if you have the feeling that you need to reinstall it or bring it back to a factory default state, you can always do that from the UMS side, from the endpoint side, and set it back to the factory defaults, which means that every local configuration, local files, local caches are flushed. So you don't need to reinstall it for that exact purpose, to be honest.
Now, Seb, there was something about a year ago, which I think still exists. So this is Pixie booting into a way you can create it. There's also the idea that if it has Windows on it, you can point it to something, run a script, and that'll work too. You have two ways of doing this, one bare metal and the other if it's existing Microsoft. How does that work?
The difference is that on the agent that we are using, so the OSC for Windows, so OSCW is the abbreviation, you can install a little piece of software that we're delivering, and through that process, install the IGEL operating system on a Windows machine. Typically, what I have seen in my former previous career was on Windows thin clients, our own thin clients or from other vendors, but also on a plain Windows 10 or Windows 11 machine where you want to deploy the operating system without having the need to go into the BIOS and switch the boot method to PXE or USB or whatever, but doing that on a really proper automated way from the beginning on.
Yeah, lots of options, lots of forward thinking, lots of stuff the other guys don't think about. How about that?
Hopefully not.
And we got a new slogan.
I just say one point I want to make was the nice thing about this, especially in this, we saw the emergence of some of this stuff as these other solutions started appearing from IGEL. It really comes down to being able to push out the OS to a device without physically touching the device. If you could remotely switch that device from running Windows to boot to Pixie, you don't have to touch it physically to have it point to this appliance, or you can push that software down from SCCM or what other tool and without physically touching it, convert it to IGEL. That's really what we're talking about here, just another way to deploy it I've used this device with like other thin clients that that might already be set up for Pixie or could easily be switched to it and then just point to IGEL. That's awesome to see when that thing boots up and just contacts and starts doing what it does. So it's pretty cool.
All right, so Seb, I got the video rolling here. We're going to walk through it.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit play with the audio turned off. Walk us through what your video is covering from this point.
Sure. So let's start with the right expectation. I get that an enterprise customer would not use our prepared appliance, which is a piece of software. It's a virtual machine that we're delivering on our website that you can download and import in any kind of hypervisor that you are using. That's something that might happen in the specific cases, but I get that most of our customers would use their own PXE method. But if they don't want to, or they cannot, or they are maybe blocked by some internet processes, that's a perfect way to get a first network deployment of our operating system without having the need to implement any kind of other solutions or maybe departments that needs to be involved if you want to deploy an image to your endpoint. So that's something which is maintained by us. So the OSC appliance, like I said, it's a virtual machine. The virtual machine is based on Debian, and this Debian machine is prepared in such a way that we installed anything inside of it. So whereas what we have on the ICG side, where we are delivering a piece of software that you can install on an existing machine, here we deliver from the beginning to the end a whole system with server services like DHCP, if you need it, with Pixie, with web service, etc. So that's something we will cover in a couple of seconds. But just to be clear, the OSC appliance can be used in addition to other systems, but isn't mandatory to be used for deploying our operating system. So first of all, I showed where to get it because we have different download sources where you might have seen IGEL components. The most common and only supported one is the IGEL.com website, where you can download the operating system and also the appliance itself. We have also other websites like myigel.biz, but that's another topic. It might not be maintained anymore in the future. So for the moment, we really focus on what we will do also in 3 or 5 years so on our own website. So on this side, I'm just covering where to download it. So that's not such interesting. So you have to enter some fake accounts. That's what I'm always doing. I would not recommend to do it for a GDPR reason, but that's what I'm doing usually. And then downloading the appliance itself. As soon as you have done that, to take a couple of seconds, if we let the video running this way, we'll have the download done. And then we have to cover a second piece of software that we need for the appliance. We already spoke about that a couple of times. The IGEL operating system can be deployed by using a pen drive, and what is behind is an ISO file. So an ISO file that you can deploy to your stick and boot from it. But since this is really a specific piece of software, please don't mix it up with the standard updates that you get for OS 11. The universal firmware update files that you can download inside of your UMS, that you can download from our website, aren't meant for writing that image on a hard disk on a pen drive. That would not work. So for that reason, besides the OSC appliance, you will also need an OSC image. But that's something we'll cover in a couple of seconds. I guess we can just skip a little bit forward if you want, Andy,
Sure.
Because I'm explaining. I'm explaining a lot in a spoken form, but in that case, I will cover it now lively. So as soon as you downloaded your OSC appliance from our website, the next step is to import it into your preferred hypervisor. In my case, I was on my Windows machine, so I used the VMware workstation. But it can also be imported on the ASXi, on a XenTegra, whatever you like. Usually the compatibility is given. So as soon as you imported the machine, most of the components are already pre-configured. So even the RAM amount that you want to allocate to the virtual machine, even the amount of disk space, everything is done already. So you don't have to fiddle around with some configuration. The only thing that I would recommend is just to be sure that you do not compete with any kind of productive environments. Please do me a favor and open the configuration of the OSC deployment appliance, and please check on the network or network adapter or whatever you like on your preferred hypervisor that you're not using a NAT or a bridge network, which would point you to a productive network. because we spoke about it briefly. The appliance is bringing also a DHCP server. So let's imagine the worst case scenario that you're booting up the virtual machine and you have a DHCP server already in place in your company. You might have a situation where the device will get the endpoint which will boot up will get a DHCP address from the deployment appliance and not from your productive DHCP server. And that can create a big mess.
Hey, Seb, can I ask you a question on the
sure.
The way it boots? So let's say, okay, so when it boots and it uses DHCP to get on the network, whether it's the existing DHCP or the one from the appliance, is it a true PXE kind of broadcast, or is there a specific DHCP helper that helps it get to this appliance?
No, into the appliance itself, it's a specific option that we're using, the option 67, if I remember right, which is used for deploying the boot image via the PXE server.
Yeah, and so in a normal production environment, it's likely that option's already being used for your phones or some other device on your network. So we want to avoid that, or we need to go in and talk to our networking folks and get on a particular VLAN or something where we can control that option. So it's not a true PXE. It's a helper that points you to the boot server where you're getting your OS from.
In that case, it will also add, we have on one hand the DHCP server, but we also have the PXE piece of software also inside in the service. So if you just maybe go back to the last section, so just a little bit more, right? Just a little bit more again, at the beginning of the section, we have the initial configuration. So before starting with that, you have to accept an end user agreement license. Not that interesting, but as soon as you hit the OK button, after you booted up the appliance, you will see a lot of red information inside of this configuration with that. So that's what you just got, Andy. So right, there's just a small piece which is covering the end user agreement. That's perfect. So first we have to give the virtual machine an IP address. So we have to give a static IP address for this machine. So that's something that we'll cover a couple of seconds. We have to do some basic configurations, like also giving a password to that machine, just to be sure that no one is able to access the web service by default. So that's the basic configuration that we'll achieve. So you were already right. So the first thing is, if you go into the machine, would it be maybe easier, and if I take over the...
Just tell me which section of your log and I'll move to it.
You're just perfect, just over there, just where you had your mouse on. So as soon as you're, perfect. So the red information was showing press 1 if you want to configure the IP address. And as soon as you hit 1, it will bring you, just go a little bit backwards, please, Andy. Just a bit, perfect. So there you can enter the IP address of the machine, which subnet mask you want to use, and which gateway address you want to use. So you're configuring your deployment appliance with a specific network address, just to be able to get it reached by your endpoints, by you, if you want to upload a new image, etc. That's good. As soon as you said that, we can go a little bit, just leave it running. So I entered my informations.
You just talked through what you see running.
Yeah. So that's what we did. So I'm just applying then the configuration that we just deployed. So that's what I have in my lab. And now we would be able to ping or to reach the appliance itself. So we have it now connected to the network and been set up properly for the communication. The next step that we want to achieve is, as soon as we did the general configuration, is to set a DHCP range and check that the server itself is running. So I'm opening the web browser, entering the address that's just entered in the wizard. So
Seb, for our listeners and eventual viewers, but for those listening that get this, you started off inside the virtual machine through the but through the UI in the virtual machine itself. And now, because you wanted to be more robust and have more, human readable, negotiable panels, panes, that now you're going in through a web browser to hit that same device so you can make additional configurations.
Yes, basically to add an image, but in general, it's just for testing, that I'm able to reach out the virtual machine, because sometimes you have problems with some port forwardings, with some virtual LAN. So that's just a test that I'm really able to connect to the web interface URL that is shown in that window.
And by connect, you mean more than just ping it. You want to make sure you can truly get to the web interface.
Exactly. So as soon as I was checking that, and apparently it was working like expected. There is an advanced settings menu. And that advanced settings menu is covering a lot of different use cases. The first one I would like to cover is to set the language, because if you want to set a password, it's always good to have the right keyboard layout set if you want to use some extra characters. So that's what I just covered. I entered mine, so a German keyboard layout. And then as soon as we covered that, we can now configure the IP address range for the DHCP server, assuming that you want to use our own. You could also disable it, but that's something we'll cover a little bit in a couple of seconds. So we are covering now the DHCP server of the OSC appliance. We'll bring it by default, and if you can use it, we would recommend it because of a small piece of features that we will show in a second. Just be aware again that if the OSC is already in a productive environment, you might have a situation where now the device boots up and gets the address from the OSC appliance and not from the DHCP server anymore. But now I'm checking in the advanced settings if the DHCP server is running, and if not, starting it, which would be always the case by default, but we still see that the status is please check settings. So a red error message inside of our command line interface with that we're covering. So we still see inactive. So the next step for myself is to go again into the advanced settings, if I remember right, and check the method for the boot up of the DHCP server itself and set it to automatic. One thing I just went through again is to enter a password now with my special characters, but still the service is not running. So you are seeing a kind of debugging that you might face in this first moment where you boot up the machine.
Seb, you're specifically talking about the DHCP service or the deployment service or both?
Both in that case. Both in that case.
Okay.
So you cannot use the DHCP server without having PXE enabled, but you could use instead the PXE service without DHCP because you might have your own and you want to point to the boot image that we're delivering inside of the preparation method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played around with both. And the first customer that I remember talking to that was considering this option, they already had a DHCP server. So we looked at the config and basically whatever DHCP option they had for pointing at a PXE, and we just modified it with just reading basically what's on our KB article. And so we shut the DHCP server off on the appliance and then just had it sitting there listening for PXE requests and obviously being able to respond when a device points to it and says, I need a file to start installing. So
yeah, for those of you that have spent time in the Citrix world, at least with provisioning services, or if you've been a desktop administrator for a while, this will all be commonly known stuff to you. For those that have not done this type of work before, it's like aliens. But once you learn the basics of PXE and helper addresses, if you need them, it's pretty self-explanatory, and it works. It's just super simple once it works.
We didn't reinvent the wheel in that case, right? So we just use existing methods.
For those listening that may be thinking we're talking about PXE dust or fairy dust or whatever, PXE is PXE. The acronym is Pre-Boot Execution Environment officially. So just wanted to put that out there for guys like me that forgot what it actually stood for.
and to be clear, and I was confused by this for a long time, that's not the operating system you're laying down. It's an operating system you're temporarily booting to so that you can lay down the actual operating system that will be what the device boots from later.
That's exactly. Basically, you're taking the OSC stick that you normally boot to on USB, install the OS, unplug the stick, and then you've got IGEL running on the device. Now you've got on this, that same OSC thing is here on this appliance, and you're just using PXE as the method to boot, pull that thing down, install, go through the process, automated, whatever, and as we'll get through it later here, but that's what we're doing here.
And then Seb, for the video that you and I and Chris are watching, what you did next is you went out and got the firmware, and now you're deploying that to the appliance. So you got the appliance up and running. Now you've got the latest firmware for the IGEL OS. You're putting that on the appliance to be pushed out, right?
Exactly. So just again, because that's one of the most common errors that you might face in that specific procedure step. Always use files starting with OSC, because if you don't use them, you will get the standard firmware, like I said, which is great if you want to update the device. But if you want to upload an image file, so deploying an image, you have to use the OSC version. And just one additional thing, you don't have to extract the zip file. You don't have to extract the ISO file. Just use the zip file you're downloading from the website. Just using plain as it is, and upload it in the web service that we are looking at on the screen at the moment.
So Seb, on that note, I was going to ask that question. Zip file is fine. It will extract what it needs and put it in the right place as part of the upload process?
Yeah, it will do exactly anything more or less automatically for you. It will also, if you already had an image deployed because you want to use a new OSC version, you don't have to delete it first. It will do that also automatically for you. So as soon as I made it a couple of weeks, a month ago, we had the 11.05.133 version was the actual one. Now we have the 11.06.210, sorry. And you want to deploy that one, just browse, select the new OSC zip file, click upload, and everything will be replaced automatically. And as soon as this one happened and your status is switching from this yellow exclamation mark to a green check mark, and the status is, I guess, valid, then the operating system can be deployed, at least from an IGEL point of view. That's something which takes sometimes a little bit of time. I can also recommend to our listeners, I'm covering that in the video itself, if that one is not working, just keep in mind that you might also have proxy issues, which might also block the upload of such bigger files, or might also have to set a whitelist to access this deployment appliance. Or on the other hand, just try another web browser, please. I'm always using Firefox, but you might also want to use Chromium instead. So just in case, if it doesn't work from the beginning on, I would think to use also an extra web browser.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm. Sorry.
Lots of places for things to go wrong, but I love what you guys are doing here, and for the most part, you've made it foolproof. It looks like.
We tried at least. So as soon as this one is done, the upload is done. You're now seeing also on the screen that you have a firmware version, which is now covered by the version you just uploaded. So what I'm doing now is, hold on a second, maybe explaining something which is extremely important, but I just forgot what the next steps were. Yeah, right. I'm starting the DHCP service right now. So that's the last step, just to be sure that I'm not colliding with any kind of production environment. And now we are seeing that we have a status code ready for deployment. Everything is green and should now makes us able to deploy our operating system. So what I'm doing now is booting up a virtual machine in my VMware workstation, Hypervisor.
Hey, Seb, let me point out for most people, a lot of organizations will have a dedicated VLAN for this process. And once the device on that network is done getting imaged, it will then flip it over to a production VLAN. Lots of ways to work around this. People just need to be cognizant of what network am I on and what am I possibly competing with.
That's a great point. Yeah. You wouldn't want devices getting an address and all of a sudden installing an OS when you didn't intend to. So, but segmenting is so. I
don't remember which university it was, but somebody pushed out an automated one of these a couple of years ago and took out about 5,000 devices. That was a bad Monday.
Oh boy,
I believe so.
Talk about ransomware. Sorry. Malware. Yeah, exactly. What the? All right. What do we got?
So we are now back on the deployment itself. So I just went through the standard deployment. Can we maybe just go a little bit backwards, Annie? Just a couple of seconds to the end of the last section. So maybe in the mid, right? So I just booted up my virtual machine with standard specs, and I just activated in the boot menu that I want to boot from network. So that was just my own test to see if an endpoint could boot up with the DHCP and get the image delivered by the PXE server.
So you went to your VM because it's a VM you're testing with.
Yeah.
And you went into the virtual BIOS and said boot from network first.
Exactly.
Maybe just boot from network only so you don't get doesn't keep going. But normal stuff, sysadmin guys have done for years.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just my let's say own test before deploying it.
Yeah, Andy, to that last point, right? If you do go in and change the boot order to Pixie, for example, like we're doing here, one of the things as a device gets imaged, the DHCP server or the appliance rather keeps a list of MAC addresses, so it knows that if that device comes back online, it doesn't need to re-image it; it just skips over it. So that's something that is in. I'm probably fast forwarding into this video where Seb talks about, but I just want to make sure that since you brought that up.
Yeah. Well, and I'm guessing, and again, I'm probably still in the Seb's thunder here. Is there a human interaction that has to happen for it to actually lay down the OS, or will it do it if it sees it?
Yep. In the standard configuration, making short, yes. You have to confirm that you want to boot a specific image, and you have to press install firmware. That's the standard way. But you have also the ability to do it unattended. I'm not covering that at all in that tutorial, just because, obviously you can break a lot of stuff by deploying an operating system unattended, but it's possible, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just covering now the OS creation wizard, which is something which might already be quite common to our listeners. So I just went through the wizard and accepted the EULA, and now just want to have it. Just in case, that's what I'm just showing with the deployment method from attended to unattended, just the configuration, but I'm not covering it in detail because that's something that I found sometimes quite dangerous. But just saying, you could do that this way if you would like to. Same on the USB stick with a small adaptation. So what just Chris mentioned is that if you booted up the endpoint through our DHCP and went through the PXE process and the device rebooted, you don't want to get it again reinstalled, or maybe having the ability to white or blacklist some devices. That's something that we'll cover in a couple of seconds. Just in case if you do not want to use our own DHCP server, because you want to do it by your own, I just covered a small Notepad++ file that is showed up in the video, where I'm showing the boot files. So the boot, the boot images that we're using for the installation, and that's something that is extremely important if you want to point it out to a specific one, without having the need to configure something on your PXE server.
Yeah. Well, Seb, that gets us to the end of the video. I think between your video, this podcast, the posting of the video of this podcast, I think we covered a lot. And I think a lot of people will be able to, if they're trying to deploy the OSC, glean enough information off what we're doing, plus the articles to get this done. Hopefully that's extremely valuable. I can tell you I'm doing this with another product, and they basically just point me to an admin guide and said, go figure it out. And I did, but I had a lot of background in this stuff. Having you do this and show it visually, us talk about it and show it visually. I think really good resources for people trying to cross-reference and figure out how to get this done.
I hope so. Thank you for the effort you're putting into this, you and Chris. I mean, it's definitely meaning a lot to the community, and I'm really happy to help whoever I can. So if questions are coming up also from the audience, just feel free to reach out to us, to me in the Agile community, or via mail, and I would be happy to help.
Yeah, both the community and potentially, if you're not part of the community, which you should be, via LinkedIn is one option. But absolutely, we're open, right? We want this to be consumed by people who need the help. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great point. And just one last thing on that is so a lot of folks, they hear about IGEL, they test IGEL, and then they make the decision to buy IGEL. Making sure, like your team and others are like, how do I now deploy it? There are lots of options, and this is a great option depending on the situation. There are others too if you have Windows devices. So, and knowing obviously how to scale or be efficient with that. So this is a great tool. Certainly, as Seb showed in the video, you can try it out, get familiar with it in a lab setting before you try to use it in production. But it's free to use. And I certainly encourage you to give it a shot, try various things out.
Yeah, definitely do this in the lab. Use VMware Workstation, Oracle VirtualBox potentially, but VMware Workstation is a great place to play with this stuff, get it rock solid, and transition that over to your production, but hopefully your deployment environment and not your production environment. You'll create a maybe a career limiting move if you do this in production without a lot of foresight. All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up. Seb, anything else you want to let the group know?
Maybe just one last thing. Let me just maybe share my screen for 1 second, if you would allow me. Okay, I cannot because it's not allowed, but okay, then it's good.
No, I'll make
yeah.
Two clicks, and you will be what you need to be. There you go.
Perfect.
Right
Just
now.
wanted to share one specific file. It was one of the first drawing that I made at IGEL for a customer, and I just found the picture back because Chris just mentioned that we have a lot of ways to deploy the Agile operating system on an endpoint, and just went through that through my pictures made for Agile. I just found that back, and it just shows you basically with my extreme limited artistic goodness that I tried to cover all the different ways to deliver the Agile operating system to an endpoint, and we have the UDC appliance, which was the former name of the OSC appliance. We have the customer software deployment tools like Arias or Barramundi or whatever. And we just wanted to cover that extremely old and maybe a little bit outdated diagram, but just found it funny that the procedures themselves didn't change that much. And we are still, we're still working with the same kind of architecture, way more professionally now, and so it's better looking diagrams than I did. I just wanted to share that one because I found it funny.
That was a great drawing, actually. All right. Well, Chris, anything else from your side?
No, just hope everybody enjoys this podcast, and certainly your feedback is welcome. We'll tee up some more topics, maybe some other things to. Like we talked about earlier in the podcast. So looking forward to gathering once again. That's all I've got.
Well, maybe one last thing, Andy, if I can just share one last thing. I forgot to mention, on Friday, IGEL will become 20.
Yes.
Years old.
Birthday party.
Yeah.
That's
just wanted to mention.
IGEL's 20, Seb's 23. It's awesome.
Oh, kind of.
That's a good point. I think part of the story of IGEL, we like to tell stories, is we're not a new company. A 20-year-old company, that's a long time in IT in some respects, right? And Linux is only 30. So IGEL is not far behind just the invention of Linux itself. And so it's just been a matter of understanding what IGEL is, and obviously shifting from the hardware focused story to really about the software and the operating system. So for those that are IGEL customers, hope you enjoy December 10th. We certainly get a company day off, so that's exciting. Get to celebrate 10 years or 20 years of IGEL. So
yeah, on XenTegra's birthday, we all work twice as hard, though. That's how we look at it.
We're working hard.
I'm just kidding. All right. Well, thanks for joining, Chris. Maybe we should do a corporate blog next week on the birthday thing. I'm sure there'll be something. If there hadn't already been, it probably has been.
Probably. Knowing Jed, I suspect something will drop on Friday. So.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it. I'm moving on to the next thing, but as always, it's great to do this, and we just keep pushing out the content, and hopefully folks at IGEL and the customer base and in the community get value out of some of these, because we like doing it and going to keep doing it. For sure. All right, guys. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
See you. Bye-bye.